Today, we are looking at a video by Kyle. Kyle doesn't say much about himself, except that he's an Orthodox Christian. I started listening to his channel intro, but it's really boring. He explains what Christianity is, I think. I only got through Adam and Eve before I had had enough. He didn't tell us anything about himself, at least not in the first minute. The video is his temper tantrum response to Cosmic Skeptic, claiming that Cosmic Skeptic isn't a real skeptic. I would let Cosmic Skeptic respond to this himself, after all. I can't hold a candle to him. He is so much smarter than I am. I only wish I could have had his reasoning ability at his age. If I did, I wouldn't have wasted 42 years of my life worshiping a god that was never really there. So why am I taking this on? Because Kyle's channel is just a little bigger than mine. To Cosmic Skeptic, we are both just gnats, and he isn't going to notice either one of us. Kyle makes some bold claims here, claims that I think should be addressed. And since this is unlikely to catch Alex's attention, we are not worthy.
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
I'll take it on. Forgive me, Alex, if I miss a few points or don't do it like you would. Since my IQ is about 20 points lower than yours, I'm sure that will be the case. But I will do my best. Let's have a chat. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, and especially to my patrons and channel members. I have a new patron. Peyton Dooley is a new grandchild, and Casper Hauser has become a channel member. Thank you to you both. Let's see why Kyle, in a 7-minute video, claims that he can show that Alex O'Connor is not a skeptic.
Cosmic Skeptic is a popular YouTuber. He was educated at Oxford and he claims to be a skeptic because he questions everything, all of his assumptions. He questioned his assumptions about religion and now he's an atheist.
Dude, calm down.
Whoa.
Okay. I get that you are excited that you have something on someone as big as Alex, but save your exuberance for your actual points, not just telling your audience who Alex is. By taking this tone in introducing Alex, you set yourself up as being out to get Alex. If that's the case, fine, I guess. But if you want to make a serious point and not come off as a jerk having a hissy fit out to score a point, try behaving that way.
He questions his assumptions about eating meat and now he's a vegan. He's a strong proponent of veganism.
We ought to not eat meat.
What is this? A parody of yourself?
He's a moral realist, but he also doesn't believe in free will. He's kind of like a mini Sam Harris.
A mini Sam Harris? Sam Harris is 7'3". Oops, wrong Sam Harris. Harris is 5'9". Alex is... It's hard to tell. This site says he's 7'1". This one says he's 5'11". I found several Alex O'Connors in sports, so it's hard to tell which one they mean. I also had trouble finding any pictures of him standing against people that we could know what their height was, so I'm not really sure how tall Alex is. But the point is, Sam Harris is small for a man. Alex is not. So describing Alex as a mini Sam Harris is inaccurate. Kyle more likely means a young Sam Harris or an up-and-coming Sam Harris. But these monikers don't really fit either, as Alex clearly disagrees with Harris on some points.
And he uses a lot of emotional appeals and bad arguments.
Seriously? Emotional appeals? I heard nothing but reason from Alex. Please back up your claim, Kyle. How is Alex appealing to emotion in his arguments? Future edit. Kyle never mentions this again and never points out anything that he claims is an emotional appeal.
And watching clips like these are very useful because this is kind of the average atheist you're going to run into.
Now Kyle has given me and all atheists a compliment here. If Alex is an example of the average atheist, then atheists are well-reasoned, articulate, and intelligent. I only dream of reaching Alex's level.
So let's see what he has to say.
Skepticism can lead you to atheism, as I believe it did for me, but skepticism is a process rather than an end. It's just the process of making sure that the beliefs that you hold, or at least the ones you're aware of holding, are in some way justified.
There is a healthy level of skepticism that everyone can have, questioning your assumptions.
This is good. Kyle and Alex have this point in common. We should have a good reason for our beliefs and should question our assumptions.
And when he brings out justification, I completely agree. We should be epistemically justified in our beliefs. We should be able to give an account. And when I say epistemic, I just mean epistemology, which is just the theory of knowledge. So we should be able to justify all our beliefs and all of our assumptions. This is specifically what skeptics do.
So far, so good. We are on the same page.
So let's see if he actually is consistent with this.
I considered animal ethics to be a serious field. It's not just that I kind of had a position on eating animals, it's that it just wasn't a moral issue. It's just your food. It's just your dinner. It's just your breakfast. This isn't the kind of thing that you would expect to apply skepticism to, right? And so when people like to say that they're skeptics because they question all of their beliefs, it's like, I'm not really interested when I'm trying to find the test of a true skeptic. I'm not really so interested in their skepticism as applied to those big questions.
What? Oh, I'm not interested in the big questions.
Well, that's what skepticism is all about. It's about the meta-level questions.
Actually, this isn't quite what Alex said. But Alex's point was skepticism can't be limited to only some beliefs. If a person won't apply skepticism to all of their beliefs, then they aren't really a skeptic. This is the same point that Kyle is trying to make, in a way. But he thinks he has a gotcha on Alex and wants to run with it, even though the real issue is that he has entirely missed Alex's point. To get Alex's point, one must back up his video and see the groundwork that Alex laid, which is this.
A lot of people have misconceptions about what skepticism is, and one of the most frustrating is that people think that skepticism is essentially a synonym for atheism, which it's not. Most of the time, if you go to a skeptic conference, if you see a skeptic YouTuber, if you see a skepticism talk or something like this, the likelihood is they're going to be talking about religion and atheism, and that's the approach that they're taking. But skepticism is not that. Skepticism can lead you to atheism, as I believe it did for me, but skepticism is a process rather than an end, right? And one of the most difficult things is not applying skepticism, but finding out where to apply it, because everybody likes to say, yeah, I question my beliefs, and most people do. Most people have spent a bit of time thinking about religion or politics, ethics, this kind of stuff, but to be a skeptic, you need to not apply your skepticism just to those big questions, but also to what seem to be just banalities.
Let's hear that again.
To be a skeptic, you need to not apply your skepticism just to those big questions, but also to what seem to be just banalities.
So clearly, Alex is not saying what Kyle claims. Alex clearly is interested in applying skepticism to the big question. His point is that most people do that, whether they are atheists or believers. What most people don't do is look at what skepticism does to the everyday questions. I should let Alex speak for himself.
Right? Because before I considered animal ethics to be a serious field, it's not just that I kind of had a position on eating animals, it's that it just wasn't a moral issue. It's just your food. It's just your dinner. It's just your breakfast. This isn't the kind of thing that you would expect to apply skepticism to, right? And so when people like to say that they're skeptics because they question all of their beliefs, it's like, I'm not really interested when I'm trying to find the test of a true skeptic. I'm not really so interested in their skepticism as applied to those big questions. But when was the last time you thought about your diet? When was the last time you thought about the clothes you're wearing? I mean, I probably should have brought longer trousers.
Kyle gets to his point by misquoting Alex. Note the emphasis that Alex puts on the word so.
I'm not really so interested in their skepticism as applied to those big questions.
But Kyle's take is,
What? Oh, I'm not interested in the big questions.
showing that Kyle has completely missed the point. Alex never said he isn't interested in the big questions. What he said is being skeptical of the big questions isn't the test of the true skeptic, as answering the big questions is what even the casual skeptic does. The test of the true skeptic is, do they question everything? the mundane along with the big questions, for that is the true test of being a skeptic. Now that we see that Kyle has shown a complete lack of comprehension of Alex's argument, it's almost pointless to listen to the rest of what he has to say about Alex. Kyle simply doesn't understand Alex. It seems his only intent here is to take a soundbite and try to ridicule Alex in a ridiculous manner. But really, Kyle, since you miss the point entirely, and then try to make fun of Alex for making a claim he didn't make, who is the foolish one here? But we'll go on with Kyle and see if he has anything else that he really does get.
That's what skepticism is all about. It's about the meta-level questions. Are ethics ethical? Is logic logical? Is inductive reasoning logical? You know, David Hume, probably one of the most famous skeptics, brought up the problem of induction. Also the is-ought problem. We cannot get an ought from an is. We can't get normativity. We can't get ethics from the fact that the world is a certain way.
And again, this isn't skepticism. This is philosophy. Yes, we get to philosophy by questioning the world around us. But Alex isn't saying don't question these things, or that he isn't interested in these questions. Rather, Alex is saying that a person looking at these questions isn't the measure of whether or not that person is a skeptic. People that study the big questions in life are rightly called philosophers, not skeptics. Though some philosophers are quite definitely skeptics. The fact that you called Hume a famous skeptic is also an indication that you might possibly be conflating philosophy with skepticism. Hume is famous for being one of the greatest philosophers ever. He was a skeptic. But not all philosophers are skeptics. I certainly would not classify Aquinas as a skeptic. And what's with throwing out some of Hume's philosophical ideas that in no way support your premise? That Alex O'Connor is not a skeptic? Is the point to share that you did your philosophy homework one day? Are you looking for a pat on the head? If so, here you go.
And we're about to see him go on a rant about how the world ought to be and we should question all these things, but he's never actually questioning the big picture, because he just said,
Oh, I'm not interested in the big picture. I'm only interested in the small level thing.
And again, this is definitely not what Alex said. What he said was,
when I'm trying to find the test of a true skeptic, I'm not really so interested in their skepticism as applied to those big questions. But when was the last time you thought about your diet? When was the last time you thought about the clothes you're wearing?
Kyle, please. Try listening before responding. Try to hear what Alex is actually saying, not what you want him to say, so that you can pretend he's just a nut. I understand that you want everyone to be like you, but face it, Kyle, you aren't even in the same league as Alex. Alex is a major league player. You, my friend, are still in the Pee-wee leagues. Let's see what Kyle is characterizing as Alex's rant.
But when was the last time you thought about your diet? When was the last time you thought about the clothes you're wearing? I mean, I probably should have brought longer trousers, for example. When was the last time that you thought about your phone usage and how that might be affecting your attention span or mental health or this kind of stuff?
So I agree that we should apply a level of skepticism to our daily lives, and we should question all of our lifestyle choices. And we're about to see him go on a rant about how the world ought to be.
Wait a minute. This is a rant about how the world ought to be? Where did Alex even mention the word ought in any of that clip? Dude, listen before you start ranting about Alex. Next, you agree with Alex's point that we ought to give more thought to everyday things that we do. So what exactly is your problem? Or is the point that you think you caught Alex in a gotcha?
I gotcha!
And now you want to get a bit of attention for it.
I mean, this has got me to question how much I'm eating. And I started doing intermittent fasting. It started at how much stuff do I have and how much money am I spending? So I became a financial minimalist. Also getting off social media, you know, deleting TikTok and Instagram, because I was questioning my lifestyle.
Cool. So you did get Alex's point, or at least part of it, and you followed his advice. So why is it a problem for you that Alex says that not everyone who calls themselves a skeptic does this? And that this, not questioning the big picture, is the true measure of what it means to be a skeptic.
There's no problem with that.
Nice. So why again are we here?
But the problem is, if you're a skeptic, you need to question, okay, why does any of that matter? He talks about pants. Why does it matter what pants I'm wearing? He said, oh, the food you're eating is important to you. Why is it important? He talks about mental health. What is health? Well, why does any of this matter? All of this is assuming that everything we do matters.
Yes, and again, that was Alex's point, or at least part of it. So we are back again to, what again is the problem?
So as a skeptic, I just question those beliefs, and he's not interested in the big questions, but he should be, because all of this, he's kind of making ethical statements. Oh, we shouldn't do this because it's bad for our mental health. Why? Why does any of that matter?
To look at a single clip of a video where Alex is talking about what is true skepticism and that not all atheists are skeptics, the title of the clip, and come away with the conclusion that Alex doesn't care about anything else is just bizarre. Try looking at any of the rest of Alex's work. He backs his claims on the importance of considering how your diet results in animal cruelty. And yes, cruelty to sentient beings matters. This should go without saying. Why does mental health matter? This also should be obvious, Kyle. A healthy person, both physically and mentally, functions better, contributes more to society, and is better able to serve others. I suppose you now need an explanation of why these are good things. Here it is. You already said so yourself. When you talked about changing your eating habits and your social media habits, this was you acknowledging that good mental health and physical health are values that you hold to. Since you already hold to these values, why do you need Alex or me or anyone else to explain to you why they are good? Why ask a question that you have already finished answering yourself?
And so he needs to ask the big questions. You need the big picture and the small picture. Be skeptical about all your assumptions and also your lifestyle. He's completely ignoring the big picture.
Except that wasn't what Alex said, now was it? What he said was that when he is looking at the test of a true skeptic, then he's not interested in the big picture. Sorry, friends. I know that at this point I sound like a broken record, but Kyle just keeps making the same error over and over. Maybe the problem is that Kyle is unable to finish thinking through what Alex has implied here. The implication, Kyle, is that at other times and in other circumstances, Alex exploring the big picture is important, but not here. One need only look at the majority of Alex's work to see that this is the case. But when Alex is testing to see if a person is a true skeptic, then he isn't interested in how they view the big picture. It's about what you look for is different in different circumstances. Let me see if I can put it another way for you, Kyle. It's like if you are looking for medieval art, you don't go to the MoMA Museum. That you are looking for medieval art doesn't mean that you aren't interested in modern art at all. It just means that modern art doesn't fit your current search. So too here, Alex is saying if you are looking for a true skeptic, don't look at what they think about the big picture. That isn't the measure of a true skeptic. To find the true skeptic, look at what the person thinks about their daily activities. Are they skeptical of these as well? Do you get it now, Kyle?
Same way. So half of skepticism is going to be trying to find out what to apply it to. So veganism was an example of one of the things that I applied it to, and I was highly surprised. Another is the non-existence of free will, as I see it. Which is another thing that totally surprised me and completely undermines any traditional sense of ethics and has a lot of, brings up a lot of problems for the criminal justice system, for example. These kind of things are crazy, but on the surface, something like the fact that you choose what you do seems so trivially true that most people wouldn't even think to consider it unless you're in like a philosophical setting. Like
this is where he really starts to contradict. He says,
I was skeptical about eating meat, and now I'm a vegan, and we ought not to eat meat.
Why? Why is it immoral to eat meat? And then he would say, oh, because it causes animal suffering. Well, why is that bad? Oh, well, because we experience suffering and we have human rights, so we should have animal rights because they suffer too. Okay, why do humans have rights? Because we gave them rights.
Goodness, Kyle isn't content to misquote and mischaracterize Alex. Now he wants to put words in his mouth. Kyle imagines that if he asked Alex why humans have rights, a good philosophical question, that Alex would say, because we gave them rights. Now, I don't know Alex's mind, so I can't say for certain, but I am fairly confident, like about 95% sure, that Alex would most definitely not say this. His entire point about animal cruelty is that animals should be afforded the same freedom from suffering that we claim for ourselves, not because we give it to them, but because they deserve it. Their lives have value. Thus, needless cruelty should not be inflicted upon them. Nor are human rights something we give ourselves. They are something we are owed because we are humans. Because we value life, thus we ought to afford all people the same measure of value that we claim for ourselves. They aren't given at all by anyone. The right of sentient beings to be free of needless suffering was valued before humans ever walked the planet. Next, Kyle claims that Alex starts to contradict himself. Want to talk about a contradiction? Kyle, you claim to be an Orthodox Christian. In the Orthodox view, one ought to do unto others as one would have others do unto you. The Golden Rule, which many believers claim that Jesus made up, but in fact was in usage long before Jesus was born, whenever that was. Yet Orthodox Christianity also says that homosexuals are an abomination and ought not to be afforded the same rights as you have. How is that not contradictory?
Oh, so they're just completely arbitrary. You just made up human rights. It's just a social construct. It's just some subjective thing that doesn't actually exist. You need to actually have a justification and account for these. And this is what happened when he doesn't question the meta-ethical questions.
And again, Kyle's problem is that he is hanging his hat on one statement that he misheard and misunderstood. And he hasn't bothered to look at Alex's work. Just in this one screenshot of a few of Alex's videos, we see 3 videos of him addressing moral dilemmas, the very big questions Kyle here is complaining that Alex doesn't address. Again, Kyle, do your homework before you start throwing out accusations. If you ever want to be taken seriously, not just as a pesky gnat, you need to talk about something you actually understand, which definitely is not Alex.
David Hume, the is-ought problem. You cannot derive an ought from an is. The fact that animal suffering is happening, you can't say animal suffering ought not to happen. It's a value judgment. Nothing in the world tells you how it ought to be.
Before I stopped Kyle here, I listened further for him to make his case for how one should make value judgments. But then I ended up going back to stop here as he completely changes the subject at this point. Kyle, you sound like you have had one day of Philosophy 101 and have deemed yourself an expert. There is so much to unpack here. First, Alex didn't commit the error you claim. He didn't make any is statements about animals, and from that conclude that animals ought not to suffer. Let's listen to what Alex actually said.
So veganism was an example of one of the things that I applied it to, and I was highly surprised. Another is the non-existence of free will, as I see it.
That's it. Veganism is something he applied skepticism to. Where is there an is statement there? I'll give you a clue. There isn't one. Next, even if Alex had made an is statement there, such as animals feel pain, he also made no ought statement there. He did imply one. If you are going to be a skeptic, you ought to question everything, not just the big questions. Again, even the implied ought isn't based on an is statement. And of course, the ought had nothing to do with veganism. That's another topic that Alex covers elsewhere. Your statements about Hume are no surprise to Alex. He has talked about this numerous times. Here's one video where he addresses that. Finally, your claims about Hume are woefully incomplete. Hume's conclusion, which is right there on your slide, is that moral judgments are opinions. Not that one can't make moral judgments, just that when you do make moral judgments, they are based on opinions. Your conclusion, nothing in the world tells you how it ought to be, is wrong, even from Hume's perspective. Hume would say, as your slide there indicates, your own values and opinions tell you how the world ought to be. If you were right, Kyle, that nothing in the world tells you how it ought to be, then there could be no morality. I suppose you could make the argument that you get morality from your God, and your God isn't in the world. But your holy book is. No one alive today, to my knowledge, has ever heard your God say anything. The only way one could get morality from your God is from your holy book, which is in the world. And you just said,
nothing in the world tells you how it ought to be.
So is that really your position, Kyle? Can there be no morality because nothing in the world tells you how it ought to be?
And then the next sentence, he denies free will. He says, oh yeah, I was skeptical, but it turns out we have no free will. So we are just random meat bags that evolved, but that have no free will, but we ought not to eat meat. What? This literally makes no sense. This is a complete nonsense worldview.
Kyle, just quit while you're behind. You clearly don't understand the issues here. Yes, Alex mentions that he does not believe in free will, and you really need to read Harris's The Moral Landscape to understand this position. It is difficult. I get it. So I get why someone like Kyle here wouldn't understand. But seriously, dude, if you want to criticize Alex's position on whether or not free will exists, use some of his videos on that topic. Not one entitled Skepticism is Not the Same as Atheism, and try to figure out Alex's position on free will from an offhand comment in this one. Kyle, if you try to understand Alex's position on this issue without actually watching what he says on this issue, you're going to break your brain. Or maybe you already have. Is that why you're here having a psychedelic tantrum?
And the problem with denying free will is it destroys the possibility of truth, because truth requires the contrast, the false, the true and the false. Because if there's only the true, then that's only what is. It requires the contrast of the false.
Okay. So what's the problem? How does saying we don't have free will make the claim that nothing is false? The two are entirely different propositions, and nowhere did Alex say that nothing is false. I won't go into detail on Alex's position on free will, but briefly, it is that our actions are determined by our genetics, our environment, and our previous experiences. None of those things are things that we choose. The actions that we take, we feel like we are making a choice, like choosing what to have for breakfast, but our choices are actually determined by other factors over which we have no control. If we can't control the factors that determine our choices, can we really say that we ever make any choices? Or are we acting on the products that go into what seems to be a choice? There is no position here on the existence of truth. Kyle, again, hasn't done his homework. He doesn't understand Alex's position, so he just mocks what he doesn't comprehend. The sad part is, he might be, and probably is, capable of understanding and making a serious argument on the issue, if he would just read about it and educate himself so he could make a serious case. But he didn't do the homework, doesn't understand the issue, so instead we just get this childish rant.
But it also requires choice between the true and the false, because you need to be able to choose between the true and the false.
No, Kyle, what is true and what is false is not a matter of choice. I can't choose for the grass to be red and make that true because I choose it. If you mean looking at the grass, seeing it as green, and choosing to accept that I believe is what you mean. But again, that is not a choice. You see the grass is green and accept it. You don't choose it. You can think that your eyes have deceived you, but on what basis did you reject what you saw? Was this really a choice, or is it a result of other factors, like maybe a past experience of misperceiving color?
Because everything that we do kind of presupposes and assumes that we have choice.
Not everything, but you are right, Kyle. This is the subject of this video that Alex made with Stephen Woodford, that if we don't really have a choice, there are huge ramifications for our criminal justice system. Is it morally right to punish a person for something they had no choice in doing? This is a novel idea that could cause major revisions in our views on the purpose, if any, of punishment. If Alex is right, and I personally am on the fence on this one, we need to completely revise our justice system to essentially reprogram people who commit crimes so that given the same circumstances, they will respond with a different outcome. Right now, with our understanding of human psychology, this isn't possible, but maybe one day it will be.
Why would we debate the things that are true and false if we don't have any free will?
Because those are unrelated topics. I don't choose what I accept as true. I accept what I am convinced of. This is exactly why we have debate. If you think you know something that I don't, then the debate gives you the opportunity to lay out your case and to convince me to change my mind. Side note, in Italian, they don't say they change their mind, they change their idea, which I think is more accurate. Because my mind won't be changed by my free will decision to change it. It will be changed by your adding input to my experience that will convince me to believe your position. You seem to be under the false impression that one believes what one chooses, rather than what one is convinced of. I throw your own question back at you. If you determine what is true or false by a decision of free will and not by external stimuli, such as receiving information, what is the purpose of debate or discussion? Regardless of what you say, the other person is just going to determine their position by an act of free will, not from the external stimuli that you provide from your argument. It's your position, Kyle, that is illogical.
Keep trying, Captain. The behavior is highly illogical.
Because people could be biologically determined to believe something false, and that would be true. There is no truth, there is only what is.
Kyle, define truth. You said if there is no free will, there is only what is. Is that not truth? How is what is not truth? You also seem to be under the misconception that biology is the only factor in decision-making if there is no free will. We know this isn't the case. If it were, identical twins would make the same choices. The fact that they don't is clear evidence that biology is not the only factor.
And this is a problem with these types of worldviews that deny free will, is it destroys the possibility of truth.
No, it really doesn't. You need to find out the position before you make these empty claims.
Like I said, it requires the false, which requires choice.
How does a false require choice? If I make a false statement, like the grass is red, what choice did I make? I didn't make the grass red by my statement. Maybe you mean that I made the choice to make a false statement? Maybe I didn't make this statement of my own free will. Maybe someone forced me to say it. So why do you think that there must be free will in order for something to be false? You really need to flesh out your argument, not just state your point again. Your point is still unsupported, no matter how many times you say it.
And it is completely inconsistent, because if he's going to go up there and debate that we have no free will, then why am I giving you credit for your beliefs? It's not you. You were predetermined to believe that.
Wait a minute. Kyle, how do you give Alex credit for his beliefs? I'm guessing you mean that if Alex didn't choose what he believes, then why does he get credit for expressing them, as he didn't choose to believe them? I think this is what you mean, so I'll address this. Why do we give anyone credit for anything? When the runner finishes a race, we give her the prize. She earned it. She didn't choose to win the race. She did it through skill and ability. We all see that she crossed the finish line first. We don't have a panel of judges to determine who won, and then they make a choice, because we can all see it. The prize is for the person who crosses the finish line first, and she crossed first. Your free will, or her free will, had nothing to do with it. She gets credit for the hard work she put in and the biology she has that enables her to do this, not because she chose to win the race, or at the race someone chose her as the winner. Because free will choice doesn't determine truth. Reality does. We can observe the reality of her winning the race. Why should Alex get credit for his views? Because he's very good at it. He does the work of reading opinions of others, educating himself, and from that he forms his ideas. Not because he chooses his ideas, but because of what biology, experience, okay, not so much experience. Alex is very young. He's still a kid in my eyes. But his work, his effort, they come together to formulate his ideas, and he shares those ideas with us. Not because he chose to have those ideas, but because they are the result of his effort. That is what we give him credit for. I cannot do what Alex does. I lack the biology and the drive to work that hard to get where he is. So yes, he deserves credit for this. If your view was correct, Kyle, that Alex believes what he does because that is his choice, why would that deserve any credit? That he made a good choice? Perhaps. But what makes a good choice or a bad choice? Is it not the effort that goes into the choice? I mean, we don't applaud someone for choosing an apple over a pear, but we do applaud the choice of an apple over junk food. The first choice was of no consequence. The second reflects a value judgment and effort to be healthy. What we need to study more is why people make good and bad choices, and are they even choices? Is there a better way to raise children to reach good value decisions based on the input given them while they are raised? This is a question for your generation to explore, Kyle. Though we need people like Alex to explore it, not Kyle.
And then you're saying that we ought not to eat meat. Well, I have no free will. I have no free will, so why does it matter if I eat meat? There's nothing in the world that tell you how it ought to be, that I ought not to eat meat.
Ah, now I see your problem, Kyle. You are conflating free will with choice. A person with no free will still makes choices. The choices are based on the input that we have received. We have both been raised that there is nothing wrong with eating meat, and thus we choose to eat it. But if we get more understanding of the suffering of the animals we eat, maybe we will have empathy for them the next time we eat, and we will make different choices. Alex is attempting to cause you to react differently based on the new information that he gives you. You might still react the same way after listening to him. You might not be convinced. But again, whether you are convinced or not by his argument isn't a matter of choice. If it were, you should be able to choose, say for a day, to believe that veganism is the only responsible position. I challenge you to this, Kyle. If you really think that you choose what you believe, tell yourself for a day that you are a vegan and believe it. Not just eat vegan for that day, actually believe that that is the only morally acceptable position. I don't think you can, because you don't believe this, and your beliefs are not a choice. Now, extrapolate from that your actions are also not a choice. This is more difficult as it is not only counterintuitive, it's also very difficult to demonstrate. It has been done, though. There are studies that show that the choices we make are determined before we think about them. Kyle, if you want to go any further with your claims, I suggest you read these. I put some links in the description to help you.
They're only what is, especially if you deny free will. This is the complete ridiculousness of this worldview.
And this is the complete ridiculous that is Kyle's temper tantrum. Live your life.
What? Oh, I'm not interested in the big questions.